When you think of a kiss, I bet you 9 times out of 10, it usually revolves around two characters who, throughout a grueling adventure or just going through many things in their lives with each other, eventually leads to a kiss showcasing who the author declares as the main couple, the main pairing of their story. Right? 9 times out of 10, it usually ends at the end of a story, sometimes maybe in the middle, and a very rare occasion you could have in the very beginning, right? But for the most part, a kiss represents that final moments where after so many adventures, so many bond moments, so many times where two characters get close to each other, they go for like, oh, he said, she said, will they not? And eventually a kiss represents that final moments where the author's like, hey, this is the canon pairing, here you go, right? And a kiss is always a way to seal the deal. Kind of like how a kiss is the final thing two people who aren't married yet kiss and then they get married, right? Then comes the 1 time out of 10 where a kiss can be used as some sort of plot device by not necessarily the main pairing that the author wants, but it can be used by another character to try and begin the process of having that character realize, oh, hold on a minute, this doesn't feel right. Or maybe the other character gets jealous that the character that maybe they didn't think they liked, but they did like, all of a sudden gets kissed, right? Or the kiss of, death, where a villain uses a kiss as a plot device to either make a character jealous or try to get with a female character without their consent, and uses it as a way to threaten the character, to make them theirs. There's always those type of characters that usually do that, and that's usually a 1 time out of 10 moment where like there's no romantic context involved at all. But they use it as a plot device to move the story forward and to allow the author to now slowly begin the process of showing which pairing that he wants to make endgame, right? So the reason why I want to talk about kissing in general is because at the end of the day, it's a very, very useful technique and moment for bonding two characters together, right? And Square Enix, and specifically the Square Enix Music Twitter channel, for whatever reason, decided to post a picture of a kiss scene in Final Fantasy X between Yuna and Seymour. If you play Final Fantasy X and know Seymour, and who Seymour is, you know that he's a POS, basically. But it was all about just showcasing the soundtrack used during the scene, where Tidus and the rest of the party go to save Yuna from that marriage with Seymour, right? But for some strange reason, there was a lot of responses from it concerning another kiss scene, which, always would be weird that when you try to compare two scenes from two different stories, it's usually, at least in my opinion, usually seen as like a Hail Mary to try and disprove something. When you want to use evidence for anything, you always want to use the main story of the game that you are playing, or of the story that you are going through. You never want to compare it to something else, because usually the author is always either different and they have different ways of writing romance, or maybe even the author is the same, but they're doing two separate stories that don't necessarily connect. You can make sort of like see patterns in certain ways, but they're different stories. They're not always going to be the same. Authors evolve, authors change depending on the story, right? But the kiss scene I'm referring to that people are trying to use the kiss scene between Yuna and Seymour is for the kiss scene in the gondola date in Final Fantasy VII Rebirth with Cloud and Tifa. Many of the responses to this kiss is trying to use that kiss as a way to showcase that Cloud and Tifa's kiss in the gondola date in Final Fantasy VII Rebirth means nothing, right? That it literally is the same type of kiss. And to me, that is mind-blowing, because the context between the two situations are so vastly different that there's no way you can compare it. There's just absolutely no way. It's essentially claiming that Cloud is a villain. That Cloud kissed Tifa without, her consent. But if you actually watch the scene, Cloud waits for Tifa to allow him to pull her into a hug. He waits. He allows her to make the decision. Seymour doesn't. Seymour actually kisses Yuna immediately and uses, the threat of killing her friends to then have her kiss him. She is uncomfortable. She doesn't consent, and she's disgusted by it. To the point where like she wipes her mouth off. Like the actual context between the two scenes are so vastly different. It's always baffling to me that it's being compared to another kiss where like it has no way, shape, and form the same, context. It just, I don't understand how you can make that comparison, right? There's just no way you actually believe that it's the same thing, that Cloud is using that kiss as I mentioned in previous videos, like some sort of rebound because he's upset, or he's using Tifa to get back at somebody or something like that. There's a bunch of reasons. I don't want to get through all of them because none of them make sense whatsoever to me, because it just makes Cloud look bad regardless, right? So it's just so bizarre that Cloud is a hero, Seymour is a villain of the story. The kisses are not in any shape or form the same. So to make that connection is baffling to me. What it also is that there is this belief that in Final Fantasy, a kiss shared between the main hero and heroine couple is usually always the main hero and the female heroine that gets kissed, right? It's usually always like that in the history of Final Fantasy, whether it's Clive and Jill, whether it's Tidus and Yuna, whether it's Squall and Rinoa. The two characters that share a kiss usually is that main character with whatever female character that they are, romantically paired with by the author, right? So what is happening here is that they're trying to use where, the main male character always kisses the female character that he will end up with, and using it to compare it with the Yuna Seymour kiss as if, whoa, hold on. Every on-screen kiss from Final Fantasy isn't always the main hero with the main female character, or whatever the female character is that will end up with the main male character. No. Look at this. This kiss was on screen. Look, it happened. See, you can use that as proof that Cloud and Tifa will end up canon because they kissed. Boom. Yuna and Seymour kissed. That means that, Cloud and Aerith are going to kiss later on in the story in part 3 of Final Fantasy Remake Project. To me, that's like, again, the context is missed here. It's not that the characters will get kissed on screen. It's who the main male character ends up kissing is who the main character usually gets paired up with in Final Fantasy. I'm not even talking about the main protagonist, because in Final Fantasy 13, Snow does not kiss Lightning. Snow kisses Lightning's sister, whose name escapes me because I really don't necessarily like Final Fantasy 13. I haven't played it since the first time I tried it, and I stopped halfway because I just was not a fan. But my mind could always change after I replay it. But I do know that Snow kisses Lightning's sister, Sarah? Is that her name? I don't remember. I'm sorry if I forgot the name. But that's not the point. The point is that usually the male character, the main male character of Final Fantasy, always kisses the female character that he is paired up with. He doesn't go around kissing every single person. He doesn't go around kissing every single female character. That, for the most part, has never been a thing in Final Fantasy, where the main character is going around, kissing everybody to try to say, who will he end up with? Will he kiss this person? It's not like your typical romance harem series that you see in like Shonen Jump or anything like that. I know it's a very common trope in a lot of these harem shonen stories, right? Well, not all of them. Sometimes most of them even have kisses at all until the end. But you get my point. There's a lot of these stories where like the character kisses somebody and now, who will he choose? Because he's kissing everybody. That never happens in Final Fantasy. And to try to use the scene of Yuna and Seymour kissing as proof that Cloud and Tifa will not get, together at the end of the remake project is so like just, even when you disregard the kiss, the idea that you're comparing like characters from another story to try to disprove or prove something, to me has always been a shallow way of proving a ship. Because even if it's written by the same author, you may notice patterns. But at the end of the day, they're writing different stories. They're writing a different story. They could use similar tactics, but you should always use as evidence, as the pure evidence for your ship, to be the actual story that the two characters are a part of, right? So it's just mind-boggling, right, that people are doing this, especially with the worst example of a on-kiss screen in Final Fantasy, because it's literally a really messed up situation. More than just, not under Yuna's consent, but literally Yuna's 17 and Seymour's like 28. It's so weird. It's very weird. Overall, that entire kiss sequence is so uncomfortable to watch, and it's literally used as a way to showcase to, the player that Seymour's a POS, that he's the villain of the story. He's a really scum, right? He's scum. But that's not what is happening in Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. Cloud is not a piece of shit. Cloud is not scum. He doesn't go around kissing people without their consent. He waited for Tifa to hold his hand. The moment she did, the moment, she allowed her hand to touch his, that's when he knew that he had her consent. And he pulled her into a hug. Then they kissed. You see the difference? Seymour literally kissed Yuna as a threat, as literally to essentially threaten to kill her friends, and Yuna unfortunately had to agree without any of her consent. It was a terrible scene overall. The gondola scene isn't any of that. So it is a really weird take to use to try to disprove a ship. I don't know what's going to happen in Final Fantasy VII Part 3. I really don't. But to use that scene as a gotcha moment, if that's the case, then does your ship really have that much evidence for it? That's what I mean when I say trying to compare another story or try to use another story, even by the same author, as a gotcha moment or a proof. It's just it's something that I would never use. I would use patterns, but at the end of the day, I will use the evidence built upon the actual story to prove why I think this ship is canon, right? But it's so bizarre. I that entire scene made me uncomfortable in Final Fantasy X, and it's just weird. You literally have a much better kissing where there's actual consent, and actually between the main male character of Final Fantasy with the female character in Final Fantasy X. It's just so weird. To try to use it as evidence that a ship won't happen in Final Fantasy VII, I just always found it weird. But at the end of the day, it's just missing so much context, and context is so important before, during, and after an event or after a scene. Please use actual evidence from the story and not use evidence from another story, even if it's written by the same author, because it just doesn't look good. It really doesn't. It doesn't help your ship. It can make you feel, a little comfortable with who you may ship, someone with, if it's made by the same author, because you see patterns. But at the end of the day, authors change. Authors change with each story, and we'll see. But yeah, I just found that really bizarre, especially with something like, out of all the kiss scenes, you just had to use that one. Oh boy. At the end of the day, there's nothing much more I could say, honestly. It's just so bizarre. But thank you so much for watching. Let me know what you think in the comments, and I'll see you guys next time.